And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night, except, as I said, tonight is not going to be Benchley Night. And it's not going to be Benchley Night for quite some time. Because we are instead just going to give Homer Price a read. Homer Price by Robert McCloskey. Robert McCloskey, you all certainly remember, did Make Way for Ducklings, also Blueberries for Sal. Maybe around blueberry time we'll read Blueberries for Sal. But Mr. Benchley, we love Mr. Benchley, but you can only read Museum Feet so many times before we need to, liven it up, mix it up a little bit. Now, I have an endless head cold and cough. So if I sound kind of congested, I am. It feels sort of like I've got my head inside a plastic bag, but I can still breathe. But anyway, if I sound weird, sorry about that. Bear with me. It's a joy to have you here. I think we raised a couple $100 for my ill-advised generosity in some of the bookings that I've got lined up here in Bellows Falls. And I thank you all very, very much for supporting that, helping my delusions continue. So we have a few people to thank tonight for their generosity. First off, Mr. Jim Frisk up there in St. Albans, Vermont, an indefatigable supporter of passenger rail, my good friend. Thank you, Jim Frisk. Ms. Catherine Fisher, artist extraordinaire. Ms. Sarah Ovenden, about to head out to Turkey. She's heading to Turkey, ladies and gentlemen, leading a Roots on the Rails. Now it's Roots, Rails, and Rambles trip all across Turkey. Ms. Sarah Ovenden. Mr. Dan Tappan. Mr. John T. Wilhelm out there in Omaha, Nebraska. Miss Martha Rowley, who is with us tonight. I see. Hello, Charles, she says. Hello, Martha, I say. Ms. Martha Rowley, thank you. My brother, Mr. Will Hunter. My brother, today on Mother's Day, Will Hunter and I remember my mother, our mother, an interesting woman. We love her dearly. Challenging, but we love her dearly. Mr. Will Hunter, my brother. Nani Moose. We always must thank Nani Moose. Nani Moose is out there traveling the world. Thank you, Nani Moose. And out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Oh, in Pittsburgh, where his beloved Pirates are 18 wins and 23 losses. One is reminded of the old Gordon Lightfoot song, 10 degrees and getting colder. 18 and 23. I think I can see how this is trending. But more importantly, today is his beloved's birthday. His beloved's birthday. His wonderful wife, Elise. It is her birthday, ladies and gentlemen. Let us celebrate. Let us celebrate with their little dog, Ginger, and my very, very, very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter. Thank you so much. And now it is time for part one. We're dividing it up, ladies and gentlemen. We're dividing it up. Because it's much longer than Robert Benchley. Much longer. So we're dividing it up, and we discovered the perfect fulcrum point at which to cut off tonight's reading. The very first story in Homer Price. And I hope most of you know Homer Price. I mean, this to me, it's a wonderful, very gentle satire of America, small town America in the first half of the 20th century. It was published in 1943 originally. The illustrations are just wonderful. I hope you all have copies of it. If you don't, I will be holding up my little paperback that I got at Village Square Books. I'll be holding it up so you can see these great illustrations. But we're dividing tonight's reading up into two parts because it's a pretty long story. The Case of the Sensational Scent. Now, about 2 miles outside of Centerburg, where Route 56 meets Route 56A, there lives a boy named Homer Price. Homer's father owns a tourist camp. Homer's mother cooks fried chicken and hamburgers in the lunchroom and takes care of the tourists' cabins, while his father takes care of the filling station. Homer does odd jobs about the place. Sometimes he washes windshields of cars to help his father, and sometimes he sweeps out cabins or takes care of the lunchroom to help his mom. When Homer isn't going to school or doing odd jobs or playing with other boys, he works on his hobby, which is building radios. He has a workshop in one corner of his room where he works in the evenings. Before going to bed at night, he usually goes down to the kitchen to have a glass of milk and some cookies, because working on radios makes him hungry. Tabby, the family cat, usually comes around for something to eat, too. Well, one night, Homer came down and he opened the icebox door and he poured a saucer of milk for Tabby and a glass of milk for himself. He put the bottle back and looked to see if there's anything interesting on the other shelves. He heard footsteps and he felt something soft brush his leg, so he reached down to pet Tabby. When he looked down, the animal drinking milk certainly was not a cat. It was a skunk. Homer was startled, but just a little. He did not make any sudden moves, however, because he remembered what he had read about skunks. They can make a very strong smell that people and other animals do not like. But smell is only for protection, and if you don't frighten them or hurt them, they're very friendly. Now, as a sidebar, ladies and gentlemen, as a sidebar, let me say that in my childhood in Wethersfield Center, Vermont, as my brother Will certainly will remember, we had chickens. We had chickens in Milford, and then we had chickens in Wethersfield. One night, I went out to collect the eggs, and the chickens like to lay their eggs in the egg boxes where you want them to lay eggs. And then they also like to lay eggs in places you don't want them to lay eggs, like behind the egg boxes. Well, I went out and I collected the eggs out of the egg boxes. And then I reached down behind the egg boxes and I felt something very, very soft. Very soft, ladies and gentlemen. And I looked down and there was a skunk looking up at me, and the skunk said, "Don't you want to be somewhere else?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And I left the chicken house at that moment. And I was very glad I did. Anyway, sidebar. When the skunk finished drinking the saucer of milk, Homer decided to keep it for a pet because he had read somewhere that skunks become excellent pets if you treat them kindly. He decided to name the skunk Aroma. Then he poured in some more milk for Aroma, and he had some more himself. Aroma finished the second saucer of milk, licked his mouth, and calmly started to walk away. Homer followed and found that Aroma's home was under the house, right beneath his window. During the next few days, Homer did a lot of thinking about what would be the best way to tame Aroma. He did not know what his mother would think of a pet skunk around the house, but he said to himself, Aroma has been living under the house all this time and nobody knew about it, so I guess it'll be okay for it to keep being a secret. He took a saucer of milk out to Aroma every evening when nobody was looking, and in a few weeks, Aroma was just as tame as a puppy. Homer thought it would be nice if he could bring Aroma up to his room, because it would be good to have company while he worked on his radios. Now, you know that's a bad idea, ladies and gentlemen. You know that's a bad idea. So he got an old basket and tied a rope to the handle to make an elevator. He let the basket down from his window, and he trained Aroma to climb in when he gave a low whistle. Then he'd pull the rope up, and up came the basket, and up came Aroma to pay a social call. Aroma spent most of his visits sleeping, while Homer worked on a new radio. Aroma's favorite place to sleep was in Homer's suitcase. Now, let me show you this wonderful picture, ladies and gentlemen. This wonderful picture. There we go. There's Homer working on his radio. There's Aroma in the suitcase. Homer's bed and Homer's lamp, ladies and gentlemen, look almost exactly like the bed and the lamp of my childhood. Probably why I like these stories so much. Also, Homer's got a train, a locomotive there above the crest of the bed. Also an American Indian on the pennant, but we won't mention that. No, I mean, there's nothing inherently disrespectful there. Anyway, one evening, Homer said, there, that is the last wire soldered, and my new radio is now finished. I will put the new tubes in it, and we can try it out. Aroma opened one eye and did not look interested, even when the radio worked perfectly. And an announcer's voice said, Mr. N.W. Blott of Centerburg won the grand prize of $2,000 for writing the best slogan about Dregg's aftershave lotion. Why, I know him. He's from my town, said Homer. Aroma still looked uninterested. Well, the announcer said that next week they would broadcast the Dregs program from Centerburg, and that Mr. Dregs himself would give Mr. N.W. Blott the $2,000 cash and 12 bottles of Dregs lotion for thinking up the best slogan, the best advertising slogan. Just think, Aroma, a real radio broadcast from Centerburg. I'll have to see that. The day of the broadcast arrived, and Homer rode to Centerburg on his bicycle to watch. He was there early, and he got a good place next to the man who worked the controls. so he could see everything that happened. Mr. Draggs made a speech about the wonderful thing Mr. N.W. Blott had contributed to the future of American shaving with his winning slogan, "The aftershave lotion with the distinctive, invigorating smell that keeps you on your toes." Then he gave N.W. Blott the $2,000 and the 1 dozen bottles of lotion in a suitcase just like the one that Homer had at home. After N.W. made a short speech, the program was over. Just then, 4 men said, "Put 'em up." And then one of them said to N.W., "If you please," and grabbed the suitcase with the $2,000 and 12 bottles of Draggs aftershave lotion. Here's the picture of that, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the picture of that. Such good pictures. Such good pictures. Everyone was surprised. Mr. Draggs was surprised. N.W. Blott was surprised. The announcer was surprised. The radio control man was surprised. And everyone was frightened, too. The robbers, they were gone before anybody knew what happened. They jumped into a car and they were out of sight down Route 56A before the sheriff shouted, "Wait till I send out an alarm, men. Then we'll chase them. No radio robbers can do that in this town and get away again." The sheriff sent out an alarm to the state police, and then some of the men took their shotguns, and they went off down 56A in the sheriff's car. Homer waited around until the sheriff and the men came back, and the sheriff said, "Well, they got clean away. There's not a hide nor a hair of them the whole length of 56 or 56A." While they were eating dinner that evening, Homer told the family about what had happened in town. After helping with the dishes, he went up to his room, and after he'd pulled Aroma up in the basket, he listened to the news report about the robbery on his new radio. "The police are baffled," the news commentator said. "Mr. N.W. Blott is offering half the prize money and 6 bottles of the lotion to anyone who helps him get his prize back." "Aroma, if we could just catch these robbers, we'd have enough money to build lots of radios and even a television receiver," said Homer. He decided he'd better go to bed instead of trying to think of a way to catch robbers, because he was going to get up very early the next morning and go fishing. He woke up before it was light, slipped on his pants, and ate a bowl of cereal. Then he found his fishing pole, gave a low whistle for Aroma. The whistle really was not necessary, because Aroma was waiting already in the basket. Homer put the basket on his bike, and they rode off down 56A. Martha, the illustrator, is Robert McCloskey himself. He was a wonderful, wonderful illustrator. They turned into the woods where the bridge crosses the brook, and Homer parked his bike and started to walk along the brook, with Aroma following right behind. They fished all morning, but they did not catch anything because the fish, they just weren't biting. They tried all the best places in the brook, and when they're ready to go home, they decided to go straight through the woods instead of following the brook, because the woods path is much shorter. The path through the woods is an old woods road. This really isn't used anymore. It hadn't been used for years, and almost everybody had forgotten it was ever built. Before they'd gone very far, Homer thought he heard voices. Then he smelled bacon cooking. He thought that was strange, because nobody ever came up to this mountain to camp. So he decided to sneak up and investigate. When Homer and Aroma looked around a large rock, they saw 4 men. "The robbers," whispered Homer. And indeed, they were the robbers. There was the suitcase with the $2,000 and the 1 dozen bottles of aftershaving lotion lying open on the ground. The robbers had evidently just gotten up because they were cooking breakfast over an open fire, and their faces were covered with soapy lather, for they were shaving. Homer was so... Oh, I'll show you the picture now. Here is the picture. Mr. Robert McCloskey's beautiful picture of the radio robbers shaving. And in the foreground, the suitcase with all the money and all those bottles. Yep. So good. Homer was so interested in what the robbers were doing, he forgot to keep an eye on Aroma. The next thing he knew, Aroma had left the hiding place and was walking straight toward the suitcase. Aroma climbed inside and curled up on the packages of money and went right to sleep. The robbers were busy shaving and having a difficult time of it too, because they had only one little mirror and they were all stooped over trying to look in it. "I can hardly wait to finish shaving and try some of that fragrant aftershaving lotion," said the first robber. Then the second robber, who had a cramp in his back from stooping over and from sleeping in the woods, straightened up and he turned around. He noticed Aroma and he said, "Look at that thing in our money." The other robbers turned around and they looked surprised. "Now that, my friend, is not a thing. It is a musteline mammal, genus Memphitis, commonly known as a skunk," said the third robber, who had evidently gone to college and studied zoology. "Well, I don't care if it's a thing or a mammal or a skunk. Can't sleep in our money. I'll cook that mammal's goose." Then he picked up a big gun and he pointed it at Aroma. "I would not do that if I was you," said the third robber with the college education. "It might attract the sheriff. And besides, it is not the accepted thing to do to musteline mammals." So the robbers put a piece of bacon on the end of a stick and tried to coax Aroma out of the suitcase. But Aroma just sniffed at the bacon, yawned, and went back to sleep. Now the fourth robber picked up a rock and he said, "This will scare it away." The rock went sailing through the air and landed with an alarming crash. It missed Aroma, but it broke a half dozen bottles of Mr. Dregg's lotion. Oh, the air was filled with that distinctive, invigorating smell that keeps you on your toes, but mostly the air was filled with aroma. And here's the picture of aroma. Here's the picture of aroma, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to stop here tonight. This is the halfway point, the fulcrum, the crux of the story. We'll be back next week with part 2. Thank you so much for joining us for Robert McCloskey Night. And we're going to have us a good time. Thanks a lot. Take good care. Don't give in to incipient fascism. See you next week. And happy birthday, Elise. Happy birthday.